As we saw from the last video, at the top, the response contains the HTTP version along with the status code. Nowadays, the HTTP version should be 1.1 and above. The status code is an important part in knowing the success or failure of our API request, so let's take a closer look. The status is a 3-digit integer where the first digit defines the class of response and the last 2 digits tells more specific information within that class. To begin, let's take a closer look at the code classes. The 100 information means the request was received and the process is continuing. The 200 success means the action was successfully received, understood, and accepted. The 300 redirect means the further action must be taken by the client. The 400 client error means the request contains some sort of incorrect syntax. The 500 server error means the server failed to fulfill an apparently valid request. There are lots of subcodes within each of the class, but especially in the 400 client error and 500 server errors. Besides the official codes, there are also codes implemented by individual software vendors such as Microsoft IIS, Nginx, Cloudflare, AWS Elastic Load Balancer, and many more. The 200 codes are typically what we want to see. They represent a valid client request and the server is able to serve the content. The 200 OK message is what we saw in the response example and is a standard response for successful HTTP requests. The 202 accepted means the request has been accepted, but the process has not been completed. The 300 redirect tells the client to look at another URL. This is typically used when we're directing clients from HTTP to HTTP sites or when we're moving our websites during the transition. As a side note, for the 300 status code, there are some implementation differences between web application and HTTP specifications, such as 303 see other or 301 move permanently. The 400 errors typically means the client request has some sort of error in it. Perhaps the syntax is wrong, the resource is not found, or the client is not authorized for the resource it is requesting. The 400 error is one of the more common 400 errors that we would see. It can be a bad request, a malformed syntax, size too large, invalid message framing, and so on. The 401 error means unauthorized, like 403, but specifically for authentication. As such, the response will include a www authenticate line in the header. The 403 error is when the client is requesting forbidden information and the server is refusing to take action. It is commonly returned by web framework when authentication is required. The 404 error means the resource is not found. Perhaps the URI had a typo, or if the resource simply does not exist. The 500 error code means the server is aware that it has encountered an error and is unable to respond to the client request. The 500 internal server error indicates a generic error message. This is the most common 500 errors we will see because out on the internet, the web server typically wants to hide the kind of problem it is experiencing. The 502 is a bad gateway error. It means the web server received an invalid response from the upstream server. This is commonly seen in situations where the web server might be a reverse proxy, such as Nginx, and is talking to a Python web framework WSGI interface that is returning the error.